There's a version of ambition that looks almost identical to calling from the outside. Same drive, same discipline, same early mornings and long nights, but something underneath feels completely different. One feels like chasing. Like if you slow down, something will pass you, like you are always slightly behind where you are supposed to be, and the other feels like direction. Not always comfortable, not always clear, but somehow not driven by panic either. The question is, which one are you actually living from right now? This is the inner atlas where we map the inner life. A lot of people are genuinely trying to figure out what they are supposed to do with their lives, and it is not a casual question. It sits heavily. It wakes you up at night. It makes every decision feel like it carries more weight than it probably should. And somewhere along the way, comparison enters the picture. Someone your age is building something. Someone younger is already being recognized. And suddenly your pace starts feeling less like a season and more like a problem. So the overthinking starts. You revisit decisions you already made. You question whether the direction you chose is actually God's direction or just your own idea dressed up in spiritual language. And you are not sure how to tell the difference. Maybe you've prayed about it multiple times, but clarity has not arrived the way you expected it to. And now you are not sure if God is silent, or if you're just not listening correctly, or if you have already somehow missed it. There is something exhausting about carrying a future you cannot yet see, especially when part of you is not fully sure whether to trust yourself, trust God, or both. That tension is real, and you're not strange for feeling it. Because underneath the career questions and the life planning, there are often much deeper questions quietly driving everything. Not just, what should I do? But, who am I supposed to become? And, can I actually trust God with all of this? Ambition is not the problem. In its healthy form, it is one of the clearest expressions of human potential. It can shape discipline, sharpen creativity, and produce meaningful work that benefits not just you, but others as well. Ambition and something deeper in us, what we might call direction or calling, can look almost identical on the surface. Both involve effort. Both require focus. Both push a person toward growth. And yet, what separates them is not the external goal itself. It is the internal source driving the pursuit. One of the central forces quietly driving self-driven ambition is a belief that most people have never said out loud. If I succeed, then I am enough. The achievement is not just about accomplishing goals. It becomes a self-worth project, a way of securing your identity through what you can produce or prove. That is why a setback hits so differently when ambition is identity-loaded. It stops feeling like, that did not work out, and starts feeling like, I am the one who failed. When achievement becomes the thing holding your sense of self together, failure becomes personal in a way that goes far deeper than the situation itself. And then there is urgency. That relentless feeling that you need to move faster. That time is slipping. That everyone else is getting somewhere while you are still figuring things out. Here is what's important to understand, though. Urgency is not always clarity. Most of the time, urgency is just anxiety wearing the costume of purpose. The mind, under anxiety, generates thoughts that feel like wisdom. I need to decide now. Or, I cannot afford to wait. Or, if I miss this window, I might not get another one. But those thoughts are often just fear trying to regain control over something that feels uncertain. And then there is the other side of it. The paralysis, the overthinking, the inability to commit because the underlying fear operating here is, what if I choose the wrong thing and ruin everything? That fear treats every decision like it determines your ultimate worth, like one wrong move could disqualify your entire future. A lot of the internal tension people feel around purpose is actually the tension between two different questions. Self-driven ambition keeps asking, what am I achieving? But calling is oriented around something much slower and quieter. What or who am I becoming? One is performance-centered, the other is formation-centered, and they pull in very different directions. If any of this is landing somewhere real for you, keep going because this is where it starts getting clearer. Romans chapter 12, verse 2 says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will." Notice the sequence. Transformation first, discernment follows. Scripture does not say, get clarity, then surrender. It says the clarity comes through the surrender. That directly challenges the modern assumption that clarity comes through more planning, better strategy, or faster movement. The biblical pattern is different. Calling is often clarified through becoming, through inward formation, through alignment with God, not just through thinking harder about your future. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6 say, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." This speaks directly to self-directed ambition and the deep need to navigate life entirely on your own terms. To have a plan you built, a future you control, and certainty before you take the next step. Calling requires trust before full visibility. And that is genuinely difficult because the human mind prefers guarantees. It prefers to see the entire staircase before taking the first step. But here is something worth understanding. The feeling of "I cannot do this" is not always evidence that you are outside God's will. Sometimes it is the very place where dependence actually begins. This is exactly why calling so often feels too big. Not because the person is wrong for it, but because calling, by design, requires dependence before certainty. Obedience before visible outcomes. Trust before control. And those things go against everything the human mind naturally reaches for. We crave predictability. We crave self-sufficiency. Calling interrupts both. Moses is one of the clearest examples of this. When God calls him at the burning bush in Exodus chapters 3 and 4, he does not respond with readiness. He responds with insecurity, fear, and outright resistance. He says, "Who am I to do this? I cannot speak. Please send someone else." These are not casual deflections. They are the responses of a man who genuinely believes his limitations disqualify him. But God's response is significant. He does not argue with Moses about his capabilities. He does not say, "Actually, you are more talented than you think." He redirects the question entirely. The issue stops being, "Are you enough?" and becomes, "Will you trust that I am with you?" Calling does not begin where self-confidence is high. It often begins exactly where self-sufficiency runs out. Jeremiah's response to his calling carries the same weight. "I do not know how to speak. I am too young." Same themes: inadequacy, reluctance, fear. And then there is Jonah, who takes a different route entirely. He does not just hesitate. He runs. He actively tries to escape God's direction because the calling threatens his views of justice and mercy. And what that reveals is something important. Resistance to calling is a deeply human response. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10 adds this. "For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do." Calling is not ultimately self-authored. It is discovered. There is intentionality already underneath your existence. And the biblical pattern shows that God prepares people for that discovery through hiddenness. Look at Moses in the wilderness, David in the caves, and Joseph in prison. The waiting is not wasted. The formation is the preparation. Jesus models all of this most completely. And what makes his life such a clear picture of calling is not just in what he did, but also in what he consistently refused. He refused premature visibility, external pressure, and self-exalting power. He refused every shortcut that would have secured his identity through performance rather than through the Father. In the wilderness, the enemy's attack was not just about behavior, it was about identity. If you are the Son of God, prove it. Perform it. Use your power to validate yourself right now. And Jesus refuses every single time. Not because the calling was not real, but because his identity was already anchored in the Father. Not in what he could produce under pressure. After feeding 5,000 people, the crowd wanted to make Jesus king by force. He withdrew. When the religious leaders demanded he prove himself with a sign, he declined. Even his own brothers in John chapter 7, verses 3-9, pressured him to go public to show himself to the world, and he said, "My time has not yet come. Not my will, but yours." That becomes the defining and striking posture of calling over ambition throughout Jesus' entire life. He was not passive. He was not without direction. But everything he did was rooted in obedience to the Father rather than driven by urgency, comparison, or the need to be seen. He says in John chapter 6, verse 38, "I have come down from heaven not to do my will, but to do the will of him who sent me." That is calling. Not the absence of movement, but movement anchored in surrender rather than self-exaltation. So here is something worth reflecting on. The anxiety you feel about your future is not evidence that you are failing. It might actually be evidence that your identity is still carrying more weight than your direction is meant to carry. The pressure you feel might not be a calling problem. It might be a source problem. The question slowly begins to shift when you recognize this. Not, how do I figure out my purpose before time runs out? But, what does it look like to surrender the weight of self-definition and actually trust God with where this goes? Those are two completely different places to live from, and only one of them produces rest alongside the movement. Calling does not always feel like confidence. It does not always arrive with certainty or momentum. Sometimes it just feels like one honest step in a direction you cannot fully see yet, but that you're taking in dependence rather than in panic. And sometimes that is exactly what faithfulness looks like. The deepest transformation is from "I need to figure this out" to "I am learning to walk with the one who already knows where this is going." Sit with that for a moment. And as you do, it might help just to be honest with what's coming up for you right now, without trying to fix it or explain it away. Take whatever this has stirred in you back into prayer, even if it's just a simple, honest conversation with God about where you are and what you're still trying to understand. If this resonated with you, consider subscribing for more conversations about identity, growth, faith, and the deeper patterns shaping our lives. And if you think someone else needs this, feel free to share it with them. I'd also love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What part stayed with you the most? And before you go, there are a couple more reflections waiting for you here on the screen. They explore different parts of the human experience that may resonate with you too. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next reflection.